Good morning from Hong Kong. I got one of my most favorite hiking spots and views just behind me, and I'm joined today by Jennifer Abrams. So I'm feeling really bright and sunny today and looking forward to today's conversation on how to facilitate purposeful meetings. Jennifer, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I've had a very fine day. You're ahead of me on the time zones, but I had a lovely day. So glad to be here. Glad to end it with you.
Great. So hey, just getting right into the topic because, this is a time of year when teachers are kind of moving out of that honeymoon phase. They're working in their teams and now they're going to have to start challenging each other. There's going to be behaviors that start to surface that nobody possibly imagined. And it's, as a meeting facilitator, you got to deal with all this and at the same time, keep people on track. So, my first question for you really relates around, what is the most important thing to remember when you are facilitating a meeting?
I think for me, when I first started working with adults, what I realized was that I had a credential on how to teach students the subject of English, and I didn't have a credential on how to talk effectively to adults. And I didn't know how to lead meetings, and I didn't know how to coach, and it is a skill. It is a skill worthy of studying to actually learn how to facilitate. So if you're now in this position and you're not so sure like how to do it, what's most important is to even learn about it, and then to recognize that there are two parts to every meeting that you're facilitating. You're actually helping people get through a task, and you're facilitating moving through the agenda and what the team has been brought together to do. And you're building the relationships between the people and how they interact so that they can be more even collectively capable. And so sometimes people are like, oh, I'm just gonna come and I'll just share like an agenda and we'll just talk. No, it's gotta be much more well facilitated and with the awareness that you've got to actually build the agenda and a way for the team to learn how to work better together.
This kind of sounds like teaching a class. If I had to differentiate between the two, working with adults in a meeting or teaching my students, is there, and this is just to be kind of provocative, is there any difference between adults and children in this sense when we're coming together to learn?
I think that adults, one of the things that I think I learned when I left the classroom was how much we as adults need to develop as well. Like the human doesn't just stop developing the minute they turn 18, right? And so we're developing our abilities, our ability to work effectively interpersonally in a group. We need guidance in how to sort of not overstep before the extrovert. We need mindfulness around how we're participating. We need all of that kind of work. It's an adult developmental skill that I don't think that we, as I've said so many times, that we just never, I think, really focused on when we were getting our credentials. As I say, we got a credential in teaching, but how to be an effective group member or how to be a facilitator, those are new skills that we probably didn't directly study in our work.
One of the things that I always like to focus in on and get people introduced to early is this awareness of self and awareness of other. And I really like how you talked about, we don't stop growing and learning at 18. And in fact, one of the tenets that I always like to talk about is that actually at 18, we start growing further apart. Maybe up till 18, we can kind of corral everybody together and force feed them some knowledge and they'll accept it, but you can't force feed adults knowledge. And it's amazing how much time and energy I hear a lot of educators spending on, just terms like differentiation. But I'd have to say, if there's anywhere you need to differentiate the most, it's probably in your meetings because you're dealing with a much more very diverse group of people that have different learning needs that are going to respond to information so much differently. And one of the things that I've really gotten excited about in collaborating with you is this idea about adult learning. And it seems like a new passion that, you know, you've taken on as well. So can you share a little bit more with me about adult learning and how that connects with meetings?
Oh, I have two different ideas of how I want to go with this, but I'll just talk about sort of the basic piece of adult learning that I learned from a woman named Linda Lambert. So Linda Lambert worked on constructivist developmental theory and leadership development, and she lived here in California in the US. And she talked about making sure that in adult learning experiences, which ironically, sometimes people don't think meetings are. I think that every meeting should also be a place where people are learning new strategies, learning from different points of view, learning from each other new ideas. I mean, so every meeting could be an adult learning experience. That we need to be mindful of the need for us to look good. We have a drive toward competence, and psychological safety and creating an affective state in a meeting with adults will allow for less, or encourage people to kind of share more vulnerably, or ask questions, or be able to suspend their certainty for a minute, or go, wow, I hadn't thought about that, or can you say more? As opposed to, I'm just waiting to prove that I know what I'm talking about. So there's a lot of design around sort of the ego that needs to be there. And I don't mean the ego in a negative way. We all want to feel resourceful and successful and capable, and we want to be viewed as competent. And that's wonderful. And there are a lot of skills that we can work on linguistically to support the development of letting go of that a little bit and saying, let's bring some safety in so we can work on some stuff that's more uncertain, I mean. And there's also one thing that she taught me, which was about, we're always in the process of identity formation. We're always growing into being more. And that is interesting because as teachers or as administrators, we're always like teacher of record. And the kids look to us as being more sort of done, cooked, certain. And then all of a sudden we get into a place where maybe we want to share like we're not so certain. So it's like we're really on it. And then all of a sudden we come to a meeting and then we're supposed to be vulnerable. It's like, it's a very interesting balance. And so if we could create a culture of that we're always forming and always developing, and it's a part of the responsibility of everyone in the group to support everybody's development, and that you're not done, that is a pretty interesting group to be a part of, right? Because then there's some stretch you can have, there's some learning that you can do. There was a woman, and then I'll let you talk, there was a woman that I was talking to in northern Manitoba. She was Indigenous. She was a First Nations, she identified as a First Nations person. And as I was telling her about meetings and how we're all so certain, she looked at me and she said, yeah, that's such a Western point of view. And it really was a moment where I sort of stopped. And she said, why come to a meeting and just tell everybody what you know? What's the point of coming together if you're not learning from each other? And just sort of setting aside your preconceived ideas and seeing if there's something else. And I was just like, and she said, we don't do that in my tribe. We don't do that. We listen. And I thought, oh my gosh. So I could be, with these adult learning assumptions, coming from a very individualistic point of view, but I certainly don't think I'm alone. So that's a piece that I can.
One of the things that I reflect on, actually, there's three things that you've kind of spurred thought in my mind around. Number one is, I always love talking about Project Aristotle. It was a research project that Google did around effective teams. Mm-hmm. And one of the most important constructs of an effective team that Google found, first they had to define it. And it was basically a team working interdependently to achieve some purpose. Mm-hmm. So those two things were so important. They had to work interdependently and there had to be a purpose. And as you're working towards that purpose, I like to think you're growing because you're learning in this process.
Yes.
But the interdependence part, the most important construct was psychological safety. So a lot of what you're talking about is psychological safety. Mm-hmm. And when you have that, as part of your group norms, and that's something that where people feel safe, where they can challenge assumptions. Another great piece of research that I came across was Gervais Bush, Canadian, Toronto. I can't remember the university right now, but he talks about the experience cube. And it's really around the ladder of inference and how to have learning conversations. And the learning conversation is really based on the fact that we live in this world of untested assumptions, because we assume it's fact, or we just don't want to challenge people. And so in this way, we're not really learning from each other. We're just kind of posturing with each other. And we're not exposing ourselves to different perspectives. Instead, we're challenging each other, and people don't walk away having that breadth of perspective because, number one, they feel challenged. There's that lack of safety. And then when I think on a cultural level in China, one of the things when I work with a lot of Chinese leaders, and this isn't just China, but there are other cultures across the globe that are very, the power distance is very high. And it's, hey, you have this title of leader, so therefore it's your job to tell me what to do, and you have to figure it out, and we're done. So I'll come to the meeting, just tell me what to do. That's the purpose of a meeting, because culturally that's what I'm expecting.
Yes.
So if you are, and a lot of Chinese educators that are in the international education system now that have been exposed to these sort of Western values of the shared responsibility and reducing power distance.
Leadership, and yes.
They go back into their, say, Chinese language team where they have Chinese teachers, and the Chinese teachers might resist to say, well, you get paid more to tell us what to do, so why are you asking us to do more? And I guess one of the things I'd like to end on with you, because it's not just Chinese team leaders that will have this problem, but when you're getting pushed as a facilitator on this mentality that it's your job, we're just here to listen, that's been drilled into people because of successive bad leaders over a number of years, that people have just come to say, just tell me what I need to do. How do we get over that? What is the one key piece of advice that you could share with our team leaders today?
That's a deep question, Michael. That's a change in the culture of a school, that development. There's a quote that I learned from a growth edge coaching group that I work with. I don't run it, or I'm learning with them. They have been teaching me growth edge coaching out of New Zealand. And there's a consultant that basically says development is not an indulgence. Development, that is a piece of what every human in an organization or a workplace needs to be doing all the time. So if we are in a culture where somebody is just delivering to us what we need to do, and we're not evolving, challenging ourselves, grappling, providing input, learning how better to communicate with each other, I don't know if we're broadening ourselves enough. And that type of adult development, given what's going on in the world, not just in my country right now, that's a whole other entire thing.
That's the next podcast.
That's the next podcast. We have got to see beyond ourselves. We've got to develop ourselves to be bigger and to question for the collective. And I think that if you just think going to a meeting is just sit and get, it's not going to be big enough for the world that we want to create. And the students are not going, students they want to know how to develop themselves, and it isn't just sit and get for them either. So we've got to actually walk it. And I think that's something, but it is a challenge, yes, culturally, country-wise, but also within the US, I see a lot of sit and get as well. And so it's not just a Chinese thing. And I'm really working on being able to communicate the reason, the vision that I sort of want to live in, the groups that I want to be a part of, where we're bigger. We're just bigger people. And that requires a facilitator who can hold a container of I'm not just giving you information, or I'm not just going through the agenda. We're actually going to design things where we're going to learn and stretch and challenge. And that's going to take a lot more from a facilitator. So Somebody said to me, and this will be my last comment, you want to scare yourself, start facilitating. Don't just teach a group of kids and have a status difference. Don't just coach one person that's a new teacher and have a status difference. Go and work with your colleagues, scare yourself a little bit and build a different system. And I was like, yep, that's my next step. So that's what I'm doing.
When I think about like those that we're hoping to help through these types of engagements and through the workshops that we're doing, of which you have 2 coming up, which is facilitating effective meetings and navigating difficult conversations for Acamas. When I think about these engagements, we're dealing with leaders. They have this title of leader. When you have the title of leader, you need to accept the fact that there's inherent in that role that you're responsible for other people. And a key message I've just taken from you is that you're responsible for their development.
Yes.
We're not just coming in to distill or dispel information or just to be a channel. That's not a leader. If we want to be a leader and we're going to wear that title, then we have to take responsibility for those that are on our team, just like we take responsibility for our students and their own development and progress. So therefore, we need to prepare our meetings like classrooms. We need to understand that there has to be development objectives for our meetings then, that people can walk away with feeling like I'm coming out a little bit more clear. I have a little bit more certainty about what I need to do. More importantly, I have a better understanding how to do it or something new to do that will stretch me as well. If I could offer one last key piece of advice for meeting facilitators, is that you as a leader don't have to facilitate every meeting. You can make it very clear that what your role is. Your role is to oversee the team and the team members and the needs of those team members. By no means does that mean you have to be sitting at the front of the room like a target. You can actually delegate agenda setting. You can delegate chairing of meetings. You can say, look, you know what? Hey, Jennifer, I'd like you next week to set the agenda and chair next week's meeting, because there's a lot of things that teams do that all members of the team are fairly familiar with. And it's a great development opportunity to put them in that, like you just said about being a facilitator, right? Put them in the facilitator chair and, give them a chance to experience that and develop it. And I would have to say that's probably one of the most important things you can do as a facilitator is find those opportunities for others to have a voice in meetings so that they can also share in that experience. So, those are kind of my final thoughts on what you've said. But I've also added something to the table. A final word?
A final word. I guess my immediate thought, I'm already feeling bad that I said it's scary. And it is scary. When we in schools have spent most of our time working with people under the age of 18, anybody else that's over the age of 18 is a little different to us. That wasn't what we wanted to do all the time. And it is different. And it is a skill and a mindset and capabilities that you can build. It's possible. So that's why we both work on this, to try to build up the skill set and the mindsets of effective and I would even add the word humane facilitators, that are really doing both team task, meeting agenda, and then development of adults, both. And so it's a twofer, and it's a worthy study. It's worthy of study.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jennifer, for imparting these wise words. I definitely have loved starting my day on this note, and I hope you've loved ending your day on this note.
Thank you. Yes.
So,
great.
With that said, I look forward to seeing you October 13th for Acamas's first workshop on facilitating effective meetings, and we'll have more about that in follow-up communications with our audience.
I'm excited.
Thank you again.
Thank you. Take care.
All right. Awesome.